Welcome to the Expanding Your Search and Stopping for Directions podcast with Brent Bailey. And at the tech booth, Jody Cook-Bailey and Luke Cardio. We are growing our circles of connections and knowledge together with encouraging conversations and positive communications. And now, Brent Bailey.
It is Monday, the 21st of September. Hi, everybody, and welcome to Expanding Your Search and Stopping for Directions. We got a new opening. This is actually turning into a real show. I mean, it's actually like really starting to develop into something. I just want to say thank you to all of our listeners and all of our audience members, because if you all had not jumped on board and supported this podcast from the beginning with your listens and your shares, we were just really trying to be positive when COVID started, but your response has really kind of driven this to become more. And I want to thank everybody for listening and watching and sharing. Why don't you go ahead and do that right now? If you would just do us that honor of dropping below and clicking that share button and sharing the podcast with your friends, your family, and all the followers for you. I'm going to be joined right now over at the booth right now with Jody and Luke. And guys, let's get this party started, shall we?
Yes.
All right. It is Monday, and usually that means, whatever.
What a downer.
Whatever.
But it's not here in the podcast studio.
No.
It's a great day today.
It is.
We have a tremendous guest on the program today. We have New York Times best-selling author and just one of the most genuine, awesome guys that you'll ever meet in your life. I had the pleasure of meeting him a few years ago at one of the Increase events, but then he was friends with the family, and so he was married to a real good close friend of your mom's,
Yes.
Lisa. And so I've got Ken Abraham on the program today.
Yes.
He is the author of so many books, but just a couple that people will be familiar with. Let's Roll. And of course the Payne Stewart biography. I guess it's not autobiography, but the Payne Stewart book, Buzz Aldrin's book.
Yep.
We could keep naming some major books that we'll get into that in just a little bit, but he's going to be joining us on the program today. And I'm super excited
I'm
to have him
too.
on the show.
It's been too long since we've seen him.
I know. Well, the last time I saw him, and I was going to save this, but the last time I ran into he and Lisa at the Christian Booksellers Convention.
Yeah.
I believe it was in Indianapolis. And we were up there with the Hagans selling I Believe merchandise, and I just walked down one of the aisles, and boom, there they were.
There they were.
That was the last time I saw them. So
It's been a while.
it's been a long while. So, but anyway, I do want to say right now, if you're tuning in, you'll hear every now and then it sounds like somebody's being shot in the background.
Right.
And it's not a machine gun. Since we've moved into this new house and our new home, we've had one of the agreements was we were going to put a new roof on as soon as we moved in. Well, we moved in, we got that started, and you can hear they're back today because the guys, they put it on there and the color wasn't right, and it wasn't us that complained.
Right.
They decided to take care of it themselves.
Yes.
And I didn't even get a chance to. It wasn't up there long enough before they were saying, "We're sorry, we put the wrong color on."
Yeah.
And so the
we
guys are back
again.
today.
They're part of. You know what? They just
Boys
want to
are
be
back
part of
in
the
town.
podcast.
They've become part of the cast.
They have.
So,
We're gonna have to add them to the opening.
so they're right above us right now, and they're not shooting machine guns. Those are nail guns going to town up there. They should be done today though. So, but anyway, wow. But let's get started with this.
Yeah.
Today is a big day.
Yeah.
Especially for people like my brother-in-law Brian, because today is National Batman Day.
Okay.
Yeah.
It is National Batman Day, and the reason I say it, I bring up Brian actually voiced Batman in one of the video games.
Video games, yeah.
And now he's also a voice of Batman for another project. I'm not sure exactly what it is. Some kind of card reader or something. He's going to come on the show and talk about it one day whenever it all finally gets released.
Yeah.
But Brian is a voice of Batman in a couple of projects, and he actually got to meet Kevin Conroy at one of the conventions or whatever those things are called, the cons.
Yeah, I was going to
if
say
you will.
like a
And Kevin
Comic-Con.
Conroy
Comic-Con.
is
Dang.
considered by many people to be the best Batman because he was the voice of Batman in the cartoons, Batman the Animated Series. And so they started talking, and when Brian said, I've played Batman on a couple of video games and such, Kevin Conroy, who's like 6'7", stood up from behind the thing, and he said, I have to kill you now. Those are really cool. So anyway, happy Batman Day.
What's your favorite, who's your favorite Batman?
I was just getting ready to say, in the comments below right now, why don't you tell us who your favorite version of Batman is? Anybody?
I'm going to go with Christian Bale.
I know a lot of folks are going to say Christian Bale because Christopher Nolan made those movies, and they're such good movies.
Yeah. I think Michael Keaton for me.
He's supposed to be coming back, too, as old Batman.
Old.
Yeah, what do you guys think
Old
about the whole
Batman.
Robert Pattinson?
I think that was amazing. The trailer was amazing.
I haven't
The
seen
new
the trailer.
Batman looks
He's a
good.
great actor.
Yeah, and this is supposed to be his movie's taking place in year 1 or year 2 of Bruce becoming Batman.
Oh, okay.
So he's younger.
Yeah.
He doesn't have all the,
Yeah.
So he's
stuff.
like more inexperienced.
Yeah.
It's time. It's time for another Batman movie.
It is.
Come on.
I personally
Let's get it
thought Batfleck was awesome. I loved him.
out.
I thought he was. I thought he
really
was
did
great.
like him too. Yeah.
The story that they stuck him with when they let whatever his name, Josh Whedon, take over Justice League, it really hampered it, in my opinion. But he looked like Batman from The Dark Knight Returns. I mean, he's big and burly and
Yeah,
grouchy.
he was
And
huge. He was huge.
he looked great. So,
I won't say I disliked him, but it wasn't my favorite. Wasn't my favorite
yeah.
Batman.
I mean, really, besides
I like
George
him a
Clooney,
lot.
they've all been pretty good.
Oh, I forgot about George Clooney.
Yeah, I forgot about that one too.
So, all right,
Sorry,
so happy
George.
Batman Day. Moving on to something else before we get to our guest today. What else is going on today? I think it's Monday, so it's a state
It is.
day.
It's New York Day.
Happy New York
Happy
Day.
New York Day.
All right.
Yeah. And then National Pecan Cookie Day. I was
Keeping
tempted.
up with our food theme.
I went to the grocery store and I was tempted to get some pecan sandies because I like them, but then I was like, yeah, it's probably not a good idea to have them in the house.
It's not.
No.
Because I could eat
absolutely
those
not.
with a glass of milk and eat the whole
Exactly,
package.
and that's what they say to do on
Yeah, because they
National
just
Pecan
kind of
Cookie
soften
Day.
right
Yeah,
up in there, and
they're
they're so good. Yeah,
Yeah.
agreed.
And then National Chai Day. Do you like?
I do
think
like
you
chai.
kinda like
Yeah,
chai.
raspberry chai is the best. I've introduced it to some people because there was only a few places that had it.
Yeah.
And I introduced my cousins in Alabama to raspberry chai.
Chai
And
is
now
good.
it's like
I
the whole
think you'd
office
like
down
chai.
there
Yeah, I like
goes
chai.
and gets
Yeah.
it. It's good. It's good.
I know I'm backtracking a little bit, but New York Day. Should we?
That's right.
We should celebrate that in Florida, right? Because there's so many New Yorkers here.
Yeah,
900
exactly.
people a day are moving to Florida right
Yeah.
now. And a third of those are from New York. The
Uh-huh.
other third are from California. And the
And-
other third are from other states
Yeah.
that, have those similar.
And they all come down. I mean, the New
Home
Yorkers
state.
come down here for the. It's almost about time for them to start making.
Yeah,
their-
I mean, it's
making their
normally,
little-
for the trip.
Their
Yeah.
migration.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
snowbirds.
Yep.
It is. So this is also the day in 1780 that Benedict Arnold committed treason on the United States. So
Wow.
he's forever known as a traitor. And so now when somebody calls you a Benedict Arnold, now you know why. This is the day it happened, 1780, September the 21st, 1780. So,
And there was one other thing that we were talking about.
well,
What else is September 21st? You gonna say it?
the. Do you remember?
oh, yeah, that's right. This is the day.
21st night
Earth, Wind, and
September.
Fire,
Yeah.
September. It's talking about
Anyway.
today. So
I don't know all the words.
it's
Yeah, I don't
this
know
is
all the
kind of
Do you
fitting.
remember is about it?
Under celebrity birthdays today, there's several that are, sometimes you look on these celebrity birthday things and you go, who is that? Because it's a YouTuber or a
Right.
TikToker or whatever. This actually has some legitimate famous people today. And one of them kind of goes along with the theme for the show. We'll save him for a second. Nicole Richie is 39 today. Alfonso Ribeira,
Oh, yay!
Who is that?
the Carlton. Come on,
Yes.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah,
He's
he's-
been in all those like State Farm commercials lately.
Yeah, he's playing Chris Paul.
Yeah.
Yeah,
he's
he's
49 today. He and I are the same age. It's really
Hey,
cool.
cool.
Dave Coulier from
Yes,
Full
from Full
House is
House.
61 today.
And now Fuller House.
At Fuller House, that's right. And Bill Murray is 70 today. But this right here, I think that this one kind of ties into the theme for the show, and we'll probably leave it with this. Stephen King is 73 today.
Wow.
Speaking
Cool.
of authors. So I
Very
would
cool.
say that our guest today is the anti-Stephen King.
You think?
I didn't plan on making that his introduction today. But anyway, I'm so pleased to have on the program today just a real genuine gentleman that we met a few years ago at one of the Increase events. And he and his wife, Lisa, are good friends of the family. And but on his own right, he has written several best-selling books that have made the New York Times best-selling list. He wrote the book Let's Roll with Lisa Beamer, and he has also wrote Payne Stewart's book with his widow. There have been just countless other books. He's written books with Bill Gaither. He's written several books on his own. One of his latest books is the book that he wrote with Buzz Aldrin about Buzz's life story, and also Randy Travis. I could keep naming him. He really got started writing books on his own, and I am so pleased to have with us today New York Times bestselling author Ken Abraham. Ken, how are you? So good to have you.
Well, thank you. I got to admit, I've never written a book about Batman, though. I have to work on that.
There you go. We aim to give here, so there you go. We just gave you some ammunition.
And don't forget Chuck Norris. I got to mention Chuck Norris.
Oh, I can't believe I forgot Chuck Norris. That's right. That's right.
He'll beat us up. He'll beat us up if we don't, remember to mention Chuck. We did 3 books together, and it was just a treat working with him. He's just a great guy.
Well,
and, loves Jesus too. People don't know that about Chuck. He really is a Christian guy.
I've heard that. I've heard that folks have really said that he's a strong believer, and that's really awesome to hear. First of all, before we jump into all that, how have you been? And what have what's been going on since COVID started? I know that's kind of a crazy season for everybody.
It is, yeah. Well, for me, it's not so bad because I work out of my house. I'm in my office here today, so this is where I spend most of my life anyhow. Now, for my wife, Lisa, she's like the Energizer Bunny. She's going all the time, and so for me, I may work 8 or 10 or 12 hours here in the office. Then we're going to go out that night and go somewhere else for a fundraiser or some special event here in Nashville. And for her, it's just that it is a change of pace. But we're doing okay, and our church is doing okay. A lot of our friends in the music business are not doing okay because a lot of the guys who play live music, of course, they're not out there on the road. And even those guys who are big name artists and that sort of thing, they're not on the road. So it has hit our community pretty hard, but people are bouncing back, and I think we're going to be okay.
Yeah, I was notice everybody that I've talked to that does travel. That's what everybody's saying. Even speakers and things like that. It's an adjustment, but it sounds like people are really starting to pull through on this. So let's get started with you. How did you get started writing books? I mean, you've written over 100, I think, and
yeah, I have.
How did you get started?
Believe it or not, I started writing in a bar, and people don't know it, but I grew up in a bar. My dad owned the bar, the biggest bar in our little county. I grew up in Pennsylvania, Western Pennsylvania, and we had 9 churches in our town and 8 bars. So you were either a drunk or a saint, and sometimes they kind of mix together a little bit,
Yeah.
So
I was just going to say a lot of folks would probably visit one on Saturday night and the other one on Sunday morning.
My dad used to say the same thing, as a matter of fact. He said, I'm not going to church with you guys. I see your Christian people here. I see him at my bar on Saturday night. So we had a hard time getting him into church for a long, long time. I grew up going to work with him at 5 o'clock in the morning. And we opened, this is in Western Pennsylvania, and this is a coal miners, factory workers kind of bar. This is not some fancy lounge, with fancy lights. This is a coal miners and a factory workers kind of bar where my dad knew all the customers. They knew him, of course, and the guys were either coming into the bar from the mines at 7 o'clock in the morning, or they're going out to the mines at 7 o'clock in the morning. They're gonna have a shot and a beer before they go out in the coal mines. That's kind of scary right there. And I would go with my dad to help clean up before we opened up at 7 in the morning. 5 o'clock was our time. We'd start cleaning, and 7 o'clock we'd open. But then, especially in Pennsylvania in the wintertime, it was dark, and that hour in the morning. And my mom didn't want me to come home in the dark, so I would stay with my dad. And back in those days, you could actually stay behind the bar. So I would. I would stay there and I would start writing little stories about some of the guys that came into my dad's bar as customers. And I still remember some of their names. One of these days I'm going to go back there and write another book from Pennsylvania. But I remember Mike Keppins and BC Bianco, Patsy Porto. I mean, it was like a United Nations of guys coming into my dad's bar there every morning.
I mean,
and they were
that sounds like it could become like a line of fiction stories and then turn into like Hallmark movies. I mean,
well, I'm not sure about Hallmark movies, but the two other kind of movies. But, yeah, they were a pretty rowdy bunch there, you know. But that's where I started writing, and I remember putting a little newspaper together there, talking about the little league games that played the night before, and talking about who got the most RBIs and all that sort of thing. And I started writing there behind the bar, and eventually I kind of grew up and said, I think I want to do this.
Wow.
And we had another guy in Pennsylvania though that was pretty popular, a writer. His name is David Mccullough. And as I grew up, I would begin reading his material. David Mccullough wrote a little book called The Johnstown Flood. Now, the Johnstown Flood took place only about 30 miles from where I lived, and it was back in 1896 or so. But David Mccullough wrote that story in such a powerful way. I mean, he's a historian, great historian. He wrote John Adams, and his new book is The Pioneers, and just to give him a plug there, he's doing okay. But he wrote the book, The Johnstown Flood. And so I read this book, and man, it was like a novel. I mean, it was history, but he wrote it in such a way that you were just compelled to keep turning the pages and keep reading this book by David Mccullough. And I said, if I ever can be a writer, I would like to write that kind of material where you're telling a historical story, something that actually happened in real time and all the rest of that. But you're writing it in such a way that just keeps people wanting to know what's going to happen next. And over the course of my career, I've had a number of books like that. And so it's been a dream come true for me.
Yeah, that's just to put it mildly. You've had a career doing that. You now, what was the name of your first book?
Oh man, first book was, you ready for this? I started writing books under my own name, and I was writing for kids. All right, high school, college age kids. And I wrote this book called Don't Bite the Apple Till You Check for Worms. It was all about love, sex, dating, being single, how to find the right person. The only problem was I didn't go to a bookstore before I started writing. And I didn't check with any publishers to see what kind of materials they were writing or what kind they were publishing. I just thought I was going to write this book. And at the time, now I'm in my early 20s, I was on the road with a band, and we're just going up and down the highway in a tour bus. There's a lot of time on a tour bus where you just don't have a whole lot to do. So I spent hour after hour writing this book, Brent. It was 937 pages when I was done with it.
Oh my gosh.
Perfect.
It's like War and Peace.
Yeah, for kids. That was really bad. Yeah, for teenagers and high school, college age kids, And it was perfect. This is before computers and all that sort of thing.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, correcting our spelling. We're talking about no mistakes at all. 937 pages. So we took that book into a publisher. And it's a wonder they didn't throw the book out and me both. Yeah. But the editor there, he saw something that he saw potential, and he was kind and he was gracious. And this guy could have squelched my career right there, and you would have never heard of me or any of the books I've written. But he said, you know what, you've got something here. He said, why don't you take this back? Take it back and cut it in half. Brent, I'm thinking cutting it in half. Man, I've worked 7 years on this book. He says, cut it in half. He says, yeah, cut it in half and bring it back to me. So I went back home and I worked on that book for, months. And I was just trying to squeeze words in at the end of the sentence and everything else, Took it back to him at 444 pages.
Wow.
You can guess what he said to me. He said, Ken, this is really good. You've worked hard on this, haven't you? I said, yeah, man, I have. He said, take it back. Cut it in half. That book published, Brent, at 160 pages. 160 pages. But it was the first book I did, and man, it went everywhere. People started reading that book, and some radio people started promoting it. Don't bite the apple till you check for worms. Back in the mid '80s, and it just took off. And I still get letters on that book every once in a while. So it was the first book I did, and it was for a major publisher, Fleming H. Revell Company at that time. They're owned by Baker Publishing now, but. It was the first of many. And so I started out wanting to write my own books. I wanted to be a voice. I wanted to say, okay, here's what Ken Abraham has to say about this or about that, So I started writing these books on my own and under my own name. But there came a point about 1990 or so where I found out that I enjoyed writing for other people even more than I enjoyed telling my own stories. And that was a major transition for me.
And that was where I was going to ask. That was my next question: is how did you get started doing that, switching from your books to writing for somebody else? And by the way, our guest today is Ken Abraham, one of the New York Times best-selling authors and just a good friend of the family. How did you get started writing for somebody else?
Believe it or not, it was one of those conventions you mentioned, one of those Christian bookseller conventions. I was going to one of those, and by that time I'd written I think 5 or 6 books for kids. By that time, you've got to sell a bunch of books to make a house payment when you're writing for kids, because back in those days the books were selling like for $5.95 or something like that, and I was a new author, so my royalty rate was about 10%. So I'm making 50 or 60 cents per book. And we had 2 little babies and had moved to Nashville, had a new house and 2 cars. And man, how am I going to do this? And so I came to the point there. I said, God, if you don't bring me some new business, I'm going to have to give up and go back to Pennsylvania, go back to the bar there where my dad used to work, and go back, get a real job or something, And so I'm going to go to this convention, and if you don't bring me some work there, I'm just going to have to quit and go home, go back to Pennsylvania. I went to that book convention, and this is the truth. I came back from that convention with 9 book projects. 9 book projects.
Wow.
That's good news. I had 9 book projects. The bad news is I also had 9 deadlines. They don't call them deadlines without a good reason,
Yeah.
But one of those books that I had coming back from that convention was with Gary Carter. Gary Carter, you may remember.
The New York Mets catcher.
Yeah, New York Mets, absolutely. And a Hall of Famer, great guy, good Christian man, loved God, loved his wife, loved his kids, just a super guy. But it was coming near the end of his career, and he didn't want to give up. He wanted to keep playing. And Tommy Lasorda hired him to come play for the Dodgers. And that didn't go too well because Tommy Lasorda had Mike Scioscia playing as catcher for the Dodgers. And Gary was frustrated. So we're trying to write a book about this time. And then he finally ended up going back to Montreal. And he closed out his career with the Montreal Expos, where he started his career many, many years before that time. Just an incredible athlete, and I loved working with him. And that was the first book. But the amazing thing about it, though, Brent, I had no intention of writing for anybody else. I was writing my own books, remember? But literally at that book convention, I'm walking down the hall, and some guy who's a publisher, he stopped, did a turnaround, a 180-degree turnaround, and shouted out my name. He said, Ken. He says, "You're just the guy I'm looking for." Man, I thought I'd robbed a bank or something. I didn't know what I'd done. He came back. He said, "You're just the guy I'm looking for." He knew me, and he knew that my dad, who owned the bar there in Pennsylvania, was also the guy who had started the Little League program in Pennsylvania, had operated the Little League program in our little town for 40 years. They named the baseball field after him and all that sort of thing. He says, "You love baseball?" He says, "I've got this story with Gary Carter. You'd be perfect to do it." He says, "Why don't you get together with Gary and see if you guys can hit it off and write a book for us?" And you know what? That was the first book like that I did. And I discovered that I enjoyed telling Gary's story even better than I enjoyed telling my own stories.
Wow.
And that was the first collaboration. And since that time, I've kind of gotten a reputation for being known as a collaborator more than my own story. I'll still write one of my own books every once in a while, but not too often. Mostly I write collaborations with high profile newsmakers, celebrities, people that could write their own books. You mentioned Bill Gaither. I mean, Bill Gaither's, he's got a degree in English, and his wife.
I wasn't aware of that. Wow.
Yeah, Bill's the only guy that ever corrected my grammar in a book. Yeah, he's a great guy. I love him to this day, and has had an incredible music career, and some great stories too. So
as you write with these with other folks, some of these people have been major celebrities. I mean, Gary Carter, a Hall of Famer, but then you mentioned Chuck Norris, but then Buzz Aldrin. I mean, Joel Osteen. Randy Travis. Those are not just well known because of an occasional thing. These people have lived in the spotlight forever. Is that intimidating to adjust to start working with somebody like that?
It is a little bit, I think. Buzz was probably the most intimidating because he's so doggone smart. I mean, Chuck Norris was great. I remember one night I was working with Chuck at his home. He was still living in California at the time. He says, "Ken," says, "I'm going to take you out to my favorite restaurant." So then I'm going to get all dressed up. I'm going to put a suit and tie on, all this kind of thing, and go out with Chuck Norris for dinner tonight in Hollywood. Well, we went out to California Pizza Company. That was Chuck's favorite restaurant. But he's just down to earth, easygoing guy. Don't make him mad.
Yeah.
But super guy. And we did 3 books together. We did his life story, Against All Odds. And then we did a couple of fiction stories called The Justice Riders, which was really cool. It was kind of like the A-team at the end of the Civil War. And they were led by this guy, Ezra Justice. If you look at the cover of the book, you notice he looks a lot like Chuck Norris.
Yeah, I noticed that when I was doing some research for this.
Yeah, he looks just like Chuck Norris, but it's a great series. And we did 2 of the books. We still have another one to do one of these days if we ever get around to it. But working with Chuck was a pleasure. But yeah, it is a little intimidating. Buzz, like I say, was a bit intimidating because Buzz Aldrin is by far the most brilliant person I've ever worked with. And I've had a chance to work with some pretty bright people. But Buzz, he's just a different guy. He's from a different planet. He's from a different world, I think.
Yeah.
But
he's definitely been to a different world. So
yeah, and yeah, you think about that. I mean, there are only 7 of them left, 7 astronauts left who actually made it to the moon, and Buzz is one of those. There were only 24 that got to the moon, only 12 that walked on the moon, and I think there are only 7 that are alive now, maybe 6. I'm sure. But yeah, he was great, and we did his book, his life story, Magnificent Desolation. A lot of people don't recognize or don't realize that when Buzz came back from the moon for a year, he and Neil Armstrong and Michael Collins, Richard Nixon, President Nixon, sent them around the world doing this world tour, going to visit with kings and queens and giving them moon rocks and all these cool things, which was great. But Buzz was not, I mean, he wasn't a guy that wanted to be out in the public. He was a scientist. He went to MIT. He's the guy that developed the whole rendezvous thing, where we're not just going to send one big spacecraft up into space and try to land on the moon. We're going to do 2 spacecrafts, and one's going to go around the moon, and the other one we're going to meet up with after we've been to the moon, that sort of thing. That was his doctoral thesis at MIT.
Oh my goodness.
So he was a scientist. But the other thing is, when he came back from the moon, he was not into this world tour thing. He was gone for almost a year, and when he came back to NASA, there was no place for him. You know, as hard as it is to believe, a guy that has walked on the moon, they didn't have a job for him at NASA. So anyhow, he got so depressed, started drinking heavily. He got to the place where he was so despondent and so down that he literally would not get out of bed for weeks at a time.
Wow.
And he got a job in Beverly Hills at a Cadillac dealership trying to sell used cars. He couldn't even sell used cars. He couldn't find a job. This is a guy that has walked on the moon, and he could not find a job. And it was a tough time in his life.
I mean, I could sit and listen to you tell these stories all day long, and I know that we're kind of starting to run short on time here. I wanted to ask you this. I know that you've also worked on like the Matthew Henry Bible, and also the it's now called the Jesus Loves Me Bible, but it was the I can't remember the name of it before that, but
Hosanna Bible.
The Hosanna Bible, that's it. What was that like working on the Bible? I mean, you talk about writing a book for somebody else that's kind of well known.
There you go. Talk about intimidation. Yeah, and my kids, when they went to kindergarten, they told their teacher that my dad wrote the Bible. I said, wow, that's so. But it was really cool, and especially now the Matthew Henry Study Bible was a major feat. And remember, I did this before computers had Matthew Henry all online. I did the whole thing by hand. I did it with 4 colors of ink pen, writing out every line by hand. If you can imagine that, and then we later typed. So it was a massive project.
You're like one of those old time monks that used to do
old
that.
Time. Yeah, man. I was like,
you have the robe and sitting in in a dark room with a candle. My goodness.
You know what? I learned so much about the Bible. I really did. And if you ever want to learn about the Bible, man, dig into Matthew Henry. You'll think you're reading something that was written last week. It's written 400 years ago or more, but it is just so contemporary to what's going on now. But I learned so much about the Bible. And then the Hosanna Bible was really cool because that was like a children's Bible where you have like 42 characters per line, and you get between 4 to 6 lines to tell the story of David and Goliath. Try that sometimes. It's tough.
Oh my God,
you
I can't
really
even imagine
know what you're talking about and condense it down. And I wanted it to be true to the Hebrew and true to the Greek. So everything in the Hosanna Bible was accurate according to the scriptures. But it was, man, I learned so much. You think you're trying to help somebody else, but you're blessed as a result. And that's what happened to me during those projects. That was great.
All right, as we start to wrap this up, Ken, you're going to have to come back on the show sometime because this is
okay.
this is the kind of stuff that we could just sit and listen to you talk about for hours. But I wanted to end with this. I know that you've written several books on your own. One of the books was really kind of spoke to me because my parents own a retirement community, and the book about your mom you being a caregiver was just absolutely beautiful. Can you talk about that real quick? Just tell me what it was like doing a book like that.
Well, it's still one of my favorite books. You know, When Your Parent Becomes Your Child. When we discovered my mom had dementia, I'm a book guy. So I asked the doctor, I said, well, what books would you recommend? And he recommended some, and they were so doggone depressing. This is going to happen, and that's Alzheimer's, and that sort of thing. Your mom's going to get bad to worse. And they were all true, but they didn't offer any hope. And so I just wanted to do something. I don't know if you remember the book Tuesdays with Maury, where the guy was saying,
Sure.
hey, my sister is dying,
Yeah.
but he's got so much to share. That's how I felt about my mom. And a lot of these books about Alzheimer's at that time and dementia, they didn't include the spiritual aspect. And my mom was a Christian woman, loved Jesus till the day she died. Man, I mean, the night before she died, Bill Gaither's bunch came on one of their homecoming shows, and they were singing Sweet, Sweet Spirit. My mom didn't know what day it was. She didn't know what she'd eaten for breakfast. She didn't have any idea where she was, but she started singing right along with those guys.
That's
Sweet
awesome.
Holy Spirit. Yeah, she never lost that. And music is one of the last things to go, and especially Christian music, the old hymns and that sort of thing. So I wanted this book to reflect that there's more to this whole thing. And boy, when your parent becomes your child, it's a weird thing, because that person who was once putting diapers on you, now you're putting diapers on him or her. It's a strange juxtaposition. But at the same time, God used that, and it was a blessing for us. And I will never regret those 3 years that we spent with my mom going through dementia.
I bet. That's just such a beautiful thing to be able to tell people. Last question, and then we'll let you go, is our guest today is Ken Abraham, just a tremendous author, and as you can tell, just very beautiful stories throughout this entire thing. You wrote a book called Making Your Work Count for God.
Oh,
And
yeah.
during this time, people have, really started to question, is what I'm doing, it doesn't make a difference when something like COVID comes along or things like that. As we get ready to sign off here, can we offer some kind of encouragement that people's work can count for them here in this world, especially with everything going on?
Oh, I think so, Brent. And the big thing is to remember that we're not working just for a company. I'm not working just for a publisher or some church or, some Wall Street company. I'm working for the Lord. I'm working for the Lord God. And man, I want to do everything I do with excellence, not just because it has my name attached to it, but because it has His name attached to it.
So good.
I'm a Christian. I'm a follower of Jesus Christ. I'm not bashful about that. I'm not bashful about it with anybody that I work with. I want people to know the Lord. I do. I owe my life to Him, and my family's life. And incidentally, even my dad's life, who I was telling you owned the biggest bar in the county. Eventually, he became a Christian and trusted his life to Jesus. And he's in heaven today with my mom, and I'll see them again one of these days. So I work with the attitude, I want to do this to the very best of my abilities, and I want to do it with excellence, because I'm in my own work, I'm honoring God. A friend of mine who is a vice president with Samaritan's Purse said something one time. He says, the excellence of our work is the platform for our witness. The excellence of our work, think of that. The excellence of our work is the platform for our witness. Man, that is the way to do it.
So
and,
powerful.
and at that point, it doesn't matter if I'm going into the office or, COVID or anything else. I'm going to do my work as a witness to the Lord, and hopefully it'll have an impact that's going to go on, not just for 2020, but 2021 and into 3030 and on into eternity. That's my goal. That's what I want to do. And,
So good.
That's why I get up every morning.
Ken, I just am just humbled by your presence with us today and thankful for your time. These are such fantastic stories, and I'm just going to throw it out, open invitation. Anytime you've got a new book coming out or anything, we'd love to have you on to hear you talk about it more.
Hey, thank you.
It's always great to see you, my friend, and hopefully we'll get to see you in person sometime soon. And it'd be great to see you and Lisa. Give her our love. Jody says to send her love. And Sharon made a point to text me this morning to say, and that's my mother-in-law for those of you who are watching. She said, make sure that you give Ken and Lisa my love this morning. So
she is the best. Hey, listen, your mother-in-law, Sharon, decorated our house whenever we first moved into this house, and we changed the thing that she did. If Sharon did it, we kept it that way.
Ken, thank you so much. I just pray that you have a great rest of your day. Tell Lisa hi for us, and just tell her we're praying for her family, and we love you guys, and we hope to see you again real soon.
Great to be with you, Brent. Thanks. Let's do it again.
All right, for sure. That's Ken Abraham, everybody. And, man, just a great interview and just a great man to talk to. Just so much there. I could have just turned it over and just let him just tell stories. Those were phenomenal. Just absolutely phenomenal. Man, thank you so much for tuning in and joining us today on the podcast on Wednesday. I have got an entrepreneur, a pastor, and a speaker and an author. She is with her husband, Steve, pastor in Canada, and they are some just amazing ministers. And she's going to be with us to be talking about how you can still make 2020 successful for you. And so you'll want to be here. We're going to be talking about expanding 2020 to be successful. Have a great rest of your day. For Jody and for Luke, I want to thank Ken Abraham for coming on the show and just giving us such great stuff. If you'd like to reach out to Ken, you can do that right there on the screen. It's kenabrahaminc.com. He has also got a fan page on Facebook at Ken Abraham. That Ken Abraham Inc. book will take you right to his author page on Amazon. I encourage you. You want to pick up books that you can't put down, right there is the place to start. Have a great rest of your day. We hope that you found what you were looking for as you took the time to expand your search and stop for directions. Have a great day, everybody.